Welcome in to the latest edition of MISL Weekly. My name's Nicholas Murray. Very pleased to be joined, as always, by Chris Economides as we take a look back on the last weekend of the regular season in the Major Indoor Soccer League. And Chris, welcome. Great weekend, terrific action, and we have a regular season champion, the Baltimore Blast, after a thrilling final Sunday that saw, well, not necessarily thrilling for Blast fans, but certainly was for Missouri Comets and Milwaukee Wave fans, and for the Syracuse Silver Knights and Rochester Lancers. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but overall, congratulations to the Blast. They have been the most consistent defensive side in the league, and they certainly earned first seed in the MISL playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give head coach Danny Kelly and the entire organization credit. They are the defending champions. Sometimes as the season progresses, you don't remember that. But until somebody knocks them off, they're the defending champions, and they sort of played second fiddle to the Wave over the course of the regular season most of the way, and then sort of laid in the weeds and came up and overtook them here in the last week of the season. So congrats to the Baltimore Blast. And they're looking forward to the playoffs now.
Very impressive 9-game winning streak to close out the season. I mean, that's obviously similar to what the Wave were doing early on in the season, but certainly very impressive to have that kind of momentum and that kind of run as you prepare to defend your title. I've seen a lot of people online chatting that they're peaking at just the right time. It certainly feels as though it could be that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they had a similar run last year. Got on a roll and didn't stop until they had gone all the way. Very similar scenario this year. They're not giving up a lot of points. We all know that defense wins championships. So
it wins a lot of regular season games as well.
It's the old adage. Defense wins championships. So obviously, with them being the defending champions and as well as they're playing with the focus on defense and, Mike Lookingland and William Vanzela, that's a tough tandem to break down.
Now, of course, the reason that the Blast were able to claim the regular season championship is because of the Missouri Comets, who they've been slightly inconsistent, a little less consistent than I think some would have liked. And I imagine that they were hoping they would be in contention for the regular season championship, but there were some issues. They lost twice to Syracuse. They couldn't quite solve the Blast when they played them, and that led them to the number 3 seed. But when this team's on, and especially when it's facing the Milwaukee Wave, that seems to be the matchup that works well for the Comets. And when we heard it last week from Lucas Rodriguez, they didn't care who they played in the semifinals. I'm betting they're pretty happy and they're pretty pleased to be playing the Wave this Sunday and Monday in the semifinals. You
would think so. I mean, having won 4 out of 6, during the season series, I think that they showed, what they're all about this past weekend. It was. And again, I've used this same term over the course of the entire season here, scary good.
Yeah.
You look at what they did to St. Louis, and scoring 27 points in their first game of the weekend, and only giving up 6, and then, clamping down defensively, going into Milwaukee, and really manhandling the Wave there. You got to if I'm head coach Vlatko Advanovsky, you got to like how his team is playing right now. Danny Waltman, I think this week's Player of the Week in the MISL, is running into shape. We haven't talked too much about Danny this year, but you know what? He's had a tremendous last month and a half of the season here, and he's looking really, really good right now.
He really has, and it's kind of remarkable that obviously Vanzela has stolen all of the goalkeeping headlines this year. But Waltman, by my math, and what we were looking at past season, this is the best points against average he's had in the 4 seasons that he's been goalkeeper for the Missouri Comets. And a lot of that has come about because of the way he's performed in the last month. In the last week, the reason he was Player of the Week is he only actually let up 2 goals. So you mentioned the St. Louis ambush game where they gave up 6 points. Well, that was after they'd pulled Waltman and put the backup in because he made 15 saves on 15 shots. He made 32 saves on 34 shots for the entire weekend. And particularly against the Waves, some of them were absolutely fantastic.
No, I think just as the Blast is peaking, I think Danny Waltman and the Comets are peaking just at the right time. Whatever the case is, Nicholas, it should be a really exciting playoff series. I know we're going to get into that, as the show goes on here today. But again, the Comets, they can beat you by scoring a whole host of goals, and they can beat you defensively, and they're going to be tough to beat. And
that was the thing that I think that you look at the past 2 wins that they've had against the Wave. They were able to beat them in 2 different ways. They were able to beat them. The key has always been to get ahead early, but they were able to bounce back after Milwaukee took the lead against them in the penultimate meeting of the season between the two. This time around, they were able to get out to the lead, and then the way that they were able to control possession and control tempo was very impressive. And I was honestly surprised that the Wave didn't press higher up the field earlier in the game, and because they were just letting the Comets control the possession, control the tempo, and they were just prepared to sit back in a five-man stance almost for a lot of the game. I know that was in reaction to the way that the Comets had played the previous week, because Art Kramer was talking about this on the broadcast. They wanted to try and be a little more, take the pressure off a little bit and be a little more compact defensively. That didn't work this time. That didn't work either. How are they going to try and combat the Comets' attack in the third meeting between the two teams on Sunday at the Independence Event Center? It's a conundrum.
No, I mean, and if you look at the season series, you go back to that first game of the season.
It could easily have been 5.
Exactly. I remember the Wave scoring, 6 points in the last minute and a half of that opening game to force the game to go to overtime, and then winning in stunning fashion in overtime. So, realistically, the Comets could have won 5 out of 6 from the Wave this year. And again, I know that there's been sort of a mindset, in the past between these two teams where the Wave, have always held the upper hand. But I think going back to last year's playoffs, when the Comets lost the first game in Kansas City, then went into Milwaukee and won 2, including the mini game, I think that whatever mindset that the Comets have had has been thrown out the window. I think they feel very comfortable playing the Wave, and at this point in time, I'm certainly not going to label one team a favorite or over the other.
Well, that you certainly can't. It doesn't. It definitely feels like a toss-up, and you could almost make the same case for the other semi-final series between the Baltimore Blast and the Syracuse Silver Knights, who have played 4 incredibly intense games. Syracuse won 1 of them, Baltimore won 3, but still every single one of these games went down to the wire, and there were questions as to who was going to take victory in each game. This is going to be and I'll say this for Syracuse. I think they got exactly the game they wanted to close out the season on Sunday, because that was an intense game. That prepares you mentally for the challenge that the Blast faced, and Syracuse was impressively resilient when Rochester would not go away.
No, I think as I had said previously, anytime that those two teams meet, it's going to be a mini war. And Rochester, to their credit, came in, played Syracuse awfully tough. You're absolutely correct. That's the exact thing that the Syracuse Silver Knights needed going into their first playoff match this Friday. Was a match of that magnitude, somebody that's going to fight and claw and go down to the last minute with them, which the Lancers did. Again, going back to your comments, I think, again, the Blast and the Silver Knights are 2 evenly matched teams. Even though Baltimore, as you said, won 3 of the 4 matches, they all went down to the wire. But Baltimore always seemed to have that intangible. I'm sure that the Silver Knights this Friday, it was their first playoff game in their history at home on a Friday night. It should be a really, really raucous atmosphere in there. And you know what? If they win that first one, puts Baltimore back on their heels.
There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure there. And there's pressure being the defending champion. There's pressure being the regular season champion and looking to follow that up with a title, and then you've got these whippersnappers from Syracuse coming in and wanting to make a big impression in their first playoff appearance.
You know what? They're in a no-lose situation.
Absolutely.
As you just mentioned, they're playing the defending champions, regular season champions. You know what? Everybody expects Baltimore to win. I'm sure that Tommy Tanner is playing that up to the hilt. We're the underdogs. We're the first-time people to the dance here. Let's just go out there and have some fun. And a loose team is always a very, very dangerous team to play.
It certainly is. Baltimore, on the other hand, they're they are, as always, dangerous. We talked about their defense earlier. Their attack, honestly, is incredibly balanced. If it's not Max Ferdinand, it's Tony Donatelli, it's Adriano dos Santos, it's Adalto Neto, it's Mike Lookingland coming up defensively and leading the team in points. The biggest problem the Silver Knights are going to face is how much time do you have your top unit out there? How many minutes can Nelson Santana play? How many minutes can Marcos Chantel play? Because the Blast come at you, if you'll pardon the expression, in waves offensively. And that's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge for Syracuse. Can they match up well enough to keep what is a very consistent attack in check?
You know, that raises an excellent point. I think because of when the games are, it gives Syracuse more of a possibility here, because there's 4 or 5 days in between matches.
Yeah, you've got those 3 days off. You've got the game on Friday night, then you've got Saturday, Sunday, Monday off. Yeah. You've got plenty of rest.
Time, so you can go hard.
You can wear a couple of your players out and they'll still have enough time to bounce back for Baltimore Arena.
Whereas the other series is a back-to-back situation where we're playing in Kansas City on Sunday night, and then from what I've heard, teams are going to be busing back and forth to each other, so they'll hop right on the bus after the game and head to Milwaukee for the Monday evening for Monday Night Football.
I would like to know who gets on the bus first, who gets the head start, and if they're going to race each other to Milwaukee.
I can guarantee you one thing: they won't be on the same bus.
They won't be on the same bus.
It's not like one of those old days where teams charter the same plane.
I'm now picturing a small interstate, a 2-lane highway where you've got the 2 buses driving side by side, both making friendly gestures towards each other out of the window.
I don't know how friendly they would be. But,
that was a euphemism there, Chris. Euphemism.
The old movie Slapshot comes to mind.
Okay. Which of these two, which coach, Vlatko Antonovsky or Keith Tozer? Which one is on the side of the bus making it look mean?
Neither, to be honest with you. I mean, probably Tozer. I mean, Tozer. I know Keith better, and I think he's more of a ham. I don't know Vlatko as well as I know Keith, but no, I mean, obviously two great guys, 2 great coaches, but. That's going to be a hell of a series. Well,
it certainly should be. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. But first, we've got to get to our interview, where we got the chance to talk with MISL Championship Series MVP last season, William Vanzela, record-breaking season this year with a 5.57 points against average. That interview will be coming up just after this break. Well, we're very pleased to be joined now by the Baltimore Blast, William Vanzela. William, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this week.
You're welcome, anytime.
Well, first of all, congratulations on an outstanding season. You set a new MISL record for points against average, an incredible save percentage, and you guys are now the regular season champions, looking forward to the playoffs. What's it been like to go through the past 4 or 5 months with the Blast?
Thank you so much. I did a great job, but before I want to thank you to all of my teammates. They helped me a lot, like start to the forward and second floors, They really play defense and help us a lot in special teams and everything. So it's not only me. So if I got goalkeeper of the year or something, that's because we have the best team in defense, So this has helped me too much.
You talk about the team defense, obviously having a guy like Mike Lookingland, other guys like Mike Diesel, Pat Healy playing in front of you. How important is that for you, and what sort of relationship do you have with those guys?
Yeah, you talk about Mike Lookingland. He has a wonderful season in defense, and also in offense. They score a couple points and a couple assists. It's really important. To me, make the difference because last year is my rookie year, first year, and play with like guys Tahiti, Mike Lukeland, they help me all the time in practice and in the games. So Diesel, Steve, JT right now playing the back, they have a lot of blocks, so it's make my job more easy.
You were obviously the MVP of last year's championship series, and it kind of felt like that was the big coming out party for you. Do you feel as though you were able to take the confidence from that series against the Comets and then kind of build on that this season?
Well, they have a really tough game because always when they play Milwaukee and Missouri is a really fun game to watch, and I really don't know what happened. I really don't. But we need to beat Syracuse first. This is our job, and this is where we focus right now. I really don't care if we pass the semifinals. It's a really tough game coming. I really don't care who we play against in the championship.
Well, you got, as you mentioned, Syracuse in the semifinals. What's the biggest difficulty that they pose you? What's the biggest challenge that you're going to have against the Silver Knights?
Well, first, they deserve make the playoffs. They have a much better team with respect last year. They have a really good players like Forbes is the second guy, highest scorer in the league, Neto. And they have Amiro, the big loss for us, It's a strong guy, smart guy, and experienced. So it's a big challenge because I think the Syracuse is the team that score more points against us. So it's a tough game, I'm sure. But if we keep the same discipline on defense and play with like each other, help each other, we can beat that.
It really felt as though the games that you guys played against each other, Syracuse and Baltimore this year, had the feel of playoff games in the regular season. Do you think that's just going to get amped up even more over these next couple of games?
Yeah, well, again, I told you, Syracuse is a good team, so it's always tough games. We beat them in Syracuse 1 point, and they almost beat us home game, last home games, So it's a really tough game for us, but we prepare. We work so hard this year. It's a championship regular season to don't make the playoffs only. We want to go in the championship and compete for another champion.
What would it mean to win back-to-back championships in your first 2 seasons with the Blast?
Well, this is amazing. I really like Guy because I'm really glad to make the best team in the league or one of the best teams. I told you, it's make my job more easier. Play with guys like in my teams, like the coach helped me a lot. Like last year, my Corinne Mumba, my goalkeeper coach, and I prepare for play an indoor game because I play outdoor first and I play futsal. So it's a big field and a smart field, a little bit close to indoor. In my first year, we won the championship, and now compete for the second one is amazing. And I want to get this champion again.
You've obviously had a great record-breaking season. Do you think about any awards? I mean, do you feel as though you might have a shot at being not just goalkeeper of the year, but maybe most valuable player as well?
Seriously, if that happen, really glad. Don't say I don't want that, But my focus is only for best for the championship and compete again for another champion. I have so much fun when I play. I love this game. This is my life. This is my job. And I'm really glad just to play, God bless me, and I have the talent to play, but I work so hard myself. And, I want that, of course. Everybody wants it. If they happen, I think it's going to be awesome. But my first thing is only for the championship, and I'm still focused about it. So what happened, happened.
Well, William, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Best of luck in the playoffs this weekend against the Silver Knights, and hopefully we'll hear from you again soon.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Terrific season for William Vanzela, and as we discussed at the end of that interview, there's the potential that he could be one of the finalists, not just for goalkeeper of the year, which I think probably he has a great shot at, but also maybe most valuable player. I mean, there were lots of good candidates out there. It's been a very balanced season with Ian Bennett winning the Golden Boot with 27 goals, Leo Gibson winning the points title and the assist title with 76 points and I think 25 assists. Who are some of the candidates that you're looking at as potential MVP candidates for next week?
Well, you know, the obvious candidate, you know, Leo Gibson, you know, Vahid Asadpour of the Comets, Mike Lookingland, Vanzela, you know, from the Blast. You know, Michelle Millwood, you know, who I think made a huge, Nelson Santana, Canardo Forbes, you know, from Syracuse.
Second leading point scorer. Very, very impressive third season.
Great year. You know, Ian Bennett from the way, you know, all the go-to guys. You know, I mean, I'd be shocked if it's not one of the names that I just mentioned. But again, I mean, you got to give these guys and these teams credit, because especially when, you know, when people know, you know, what type of player you are and how good you are, teams tend to focus on you, and get all the names that I just mentioned still performed at a very high level. And hats off to him.
Well, as far as the MISL Awards voting is concerned, Chris and I do not get a vote, so don't be concerned about that. The way it works is each of the 7 teams in the league gets 2 votes. The head coach gets a vote, and then a team executive, whether it's the team's general manager or the owner, gets a vote. And they are allowed to, and they send their nominations in, they send their votes in, they get tallied here at the office, and we'll have finalists for you next week and ahead of the MISL Championship Series. If you had to fill out a ballot, who would your MVP ballot be? 1, 2, 3.
Oh boy, that's a tough question. Let me just go back to the comment that you just made. As sure as you and I are sitting here talking to Nicholas, somebody's going to accuse the league or me or somebody of, why did you choose that guy as the MVP, or why is he on the All-Star team, or why, you know, why?
Yeah.
We have nothing to do.
We have no say.
You know, put it on the.
We'd like to have a say.
Put it on the website. You know, league has no say in who wins awards.
This is, and it's good that way, because the way it should be is these are the coaches, these are the GMs, these are the people who are seeing each of these teams game in, game out, up close. They have much better access than we do. I mean, I obviously don't get to travel very much. I don't get to see all of the games I see on stream, so I don't get to see the minutiae of the games. I don't get to see the work that these guys do off the ball and all that kind of stuff. So it's obviously much better that the teams are voting on this, much more democratic that way than certainly me or Chris having the chance to vote on this.
Well, I don't know about that. You know, nobody's watched more games this year than you have, Nicholas. I would be very, very comfortable in saying, let Nicholas choose this thing, and it'll be 99% right. But
that's way
anyways,
too much pressure.
We have zero say in that. Now, going to your question.
You've stalled enough. Now it's
no.
time.
Well, I mean, again, MVP means exactly that. Most valuable player to his team, and what that player has meant to his team. I mean, let's start off with Syracuse. I mean, I think it's got to come from one of the playoff teams. From my perspective, with all due respect to the other 3 non-playoff teams. You know, although last year
it was Doug Miller.
It was Doug Miller. I mean, well, Dougie had a season last year that was just incredible. That no matter whether you were on a playoff team or not, it had to be Doug Miller last year. So that was, in my opinion, the exception of the rule. I think this year, you know, you look at Syracuse and what Michelle Millwood has meant to that team, taking them to the playoffs this year. You know, and talking to the coaches and talking to Tommy Tanner, he's been great in the locker room. Been no issues. You know, Canardo Forbes, from their perspective, Nelson Santana. From a Baltimore perspective, you got to look at a guy like Mike Lookingland. What he means to that franchise, what he means on the field to that team, his mere presence on there. You know what? I mean, it used to be, Eduardo Neto with all the points and the goals and everything else. But I think if you look at the Blast, how they're built this year, you got to look at a guy like Mike Lookingland. From a Missouri standpoint, you got to look at, obviously, Leo Gibson, the league's leading scorer. But I personally think that Vahid Asadpour is to steal an old baseball axiom, is the straw that stirs the drink. Yeah. There for the Comets. I think that they're a different club. Very good to see him score in his comeback game for them. Yeah, I think he means a lot to that club. I'm pretty sure that Vahid's going to get some, rightfully so, get some votes. Great player. I think the thing with Asadpour for me is obviously I think the injury is probably going to hurt him a little bit in the eyes of the voters, because he was leading the league in points when he got injured and ended up, I think, finishing maybe 4th or 5th in the league. And so that may play a factor. If I had a ballot, well, you don't let me finish. Well, okay. Well, who's your one? Milwaukee. Milwaukee. I mean, you got a guy like Ian Bennett. You got a guy like Marcio Liete, who I don't think has had the type of year that he's had in the past. So I think from a Milwaukee standpoint, you'd have to look at Bennett or. I mean that's a team that's sort of like the no-name defense. There's not a lot of stars. There's so much. I mean, you have Bennett, you have Leite, you have Oliveira, you have Heverton, you have Carlos Munoz, who had a great impact for the team this year, and you have that very good defensive unit and Marcel Feenstra and Nick Vorberg in goal. That's the thing with Milwaukee for me, is that they are such a cohesive unit where they don't necessarily have that one standout player. It's kind of been Bennett for them this year, because obviously you can't overlook the fact that he scored more goals than anyone else in the league. But that came on the back of some very big performances. There were some games, including the last 2 games against Missouri, where he was held without a point. And that makes a big difference in my mind when it comes to looking at who the MVP is. To answer your question, my pick would probably be a guy like Mike Lookingland. When you look at what he's meant to that team, when you look at how Baltimore did this year, you look at his offensive prowess, his defensive prowess, what he means to his team. I think if I were a voting member, that would be my choice. I think you're probably right. I think Lookingland would probably be the guy at the top of my ballot, followed by Michelle Millward in number 2, and then Leo Gibson number 3, because Gibson's consistency has been excellent throughout. Great minds think alike, Nicholas. Throughout the season. 1, 2, 3. So that would be, if I had a pick, that would be my 1, 2, 3. Now, obviously, to carry over the Lookingland discussion, that kind of makes him, I think he's a very clear favourite for Defender of the Year for a 2nd straight year. You can certainly look at the influence Nelson Santana's had on Syracuse and the fortunes and the way that he's played. I think you also look at a guy like Brian Harris, has had a tremendous season for Missouri. Great point. Class player, by the way. Class player. Excellent player. Brings the offense when needed to, hits a terrific strike from long range. But he has done a terrific job, as we mentioned, going up against the best players from the opposing team and really making it very difficult for them. I mentioned Ian Bennett, shut out in each of the last 2 games against Missouri. That is down to a guy like Brian Harris doing his job defensively and kind of taking the focus off his offensive play, which is very, very good. But he's become a lot better, I think, picking and choosing when to move forward over making sure that he takes care of his defensive responsibilities. And please don't diminish the role that Kennardo Forbes has had for Syracuse. Absolutely not. What a tremendous player. You got to give head coach Tommy Tanner all the credit in the world to find a player like him and to stick with him. He wasn't, when he signed him 3 years ago. We don't have a breakout player of the year award in the MISL, but if we did, it would probably be Kennardo Forbes. I mean, just a tremendous player, tremendous skill. I think out of some of the names that you and I just mentioned, I would be stunned if one of those people weren't named. Didn't take home an award or 2. Exactly. Now, there's one other award, and to me, there's the Rookie of the Year.
And to me, this is a really interesting debate. This might be the most interesting debate of all of them, because to me, you've got two outstanding candidates here. One with the St. Louis Ambush and O'Dane Sinclair, who, as far as I know, led all rookies with 37 points this season, played the full season, put in outstanding work. Even when he wasn't scoring goals, he was putting in the work to try and make things difficult for opposing defenses. And he was always a guy that stood out to me, particularly when they were playing at home. On the flip side of that, you've got a guy in Max Touloud, who joined the Pennsylvania Roar in the middle of the season, got transferred to the Missouri Comets at the roster freeze, and he's put up 32 points in 9 games, including a 5-goal game last week against St. Louis that was just one of the, I believe it was either his 3rd or 4th goal, where he basically went past 3 ambush players and buried a terrific finish into the back of the net. I mean, this kid has been absolutely outstanding, and he's a guy that the Comets craftily picked up and could make a massive impact for them in the playoffs. Now, I got to say, of the two, do you take the body of work over the entire season, or do you take the guy that came in and was basically a shooting star for the second half?
Good question. I'm more of an entire season sort of guy. I know that O'Dean Sinclair has gone in. He's obviously struggled a little bit. Not that Max didn't struggle playing for the Pennsylvania Roar earlier on. But O'Dean's been there for the entire year. He's gone through the travel weariness, all the aches and pains of being there for the entire year. But
and he's averaged almost 2 points a game to doing it.
You know what? I don't think that you could go wrong with either one of those two selections. I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Who's your coach of the year?
My coach of the year. That's a really good question, because obviously that each of the coaches has done a terrific job. You look at Tommy Tanner and what he's done with building that team. And Tommy's done a great job over the past 3 years building that team up from the ground, where now you're in your 3rd season and you have the guys that you've stuck with, that you've built, like a Canado Forbes. You've made some good additions like a Marshall Millwood, obviously, but guys like LJ Papaleo coming in and chipping in goals here and there. You've got guys, Slavisa Ubi-Pavipovic from the first season, he was Rookie of the Year. I think he's definitely progressed, and he's been a big part of that team, as has an acquisition like Bo Jelovac. So you've got all of these different parts that Tommy has really brought together well. Then you've got a guy like Vlatko Andonovski, who there hasn't quite been the consistency I think the Comets hoped for this year in his first season. But man, when they've needed to get the results, when they've needed to get big wins, they've been able to produce, especially against Milwaukee. Now, you obviously have the 2 veteran coaches in Danny Kelly and Keith Tozer, who both have done exceptional jobs, not just maintaining the core of their team, but if you look at some of the roster turnover that they've had in recent years, they've been able to bring in some excellent talent to replace the departures that they've had. You look at what Carlos Munoz has meant to the Wave, Juddy McKinney coming in and putting in really solid minutes defensively for the Wave this season. Then you look at what Baltimore's been able to do, bringing in William Vanzela to replace the legend that was Sagu, and what he's meant to the team these last 2 seasons. These are very, very sharp coaches who knew what they needed to do in order to make sure their team remained competitive. If you put a gun to my head, I'd probably say Tommy Tanner, because getting Syracuse to the playoffs for the first time in their history has been a monumental achievement for him. Getting that team focused, getting that team playing hard every single night, giving every single team the game that the Silver Knights have this season has been very, very impressive. But that's one of the situations where you really feel sorry for the voters that they have to leave one of those guys off the ballot, because it's an incredibly tough decision.
As always, Nicholas, eloquent. You answered the question exactly how I thought that you would answer it in about 15 minutes. No, but I everything that you just said is spot on about how I'm thinking. All 4 coaches, especially Danny Kelly, Keith Tozer, Tommy Tanner, I know very, very well. And the little that I've known, Vlatko, great guy, class individual, done a tremendous job. So I consider them all four not only excellent coaches, but good friends. I've got to agree with you. I think maybe Danny and Keith are tired of winning these Coach of the Year awards.
I'm pretty sure they're not tired of winning them.
No, it's the Coach of the Year awards. Nobody gets tired of winning a championship.
I don't think any. I'm pretty sure I've yet to meet the person who tires of gaining individual acclaim.
No, but you know what? I mean, all kidding aside, I think, the voters who are the teams and who are the other coaches and owners and GMs are going to have their hands full with making a decision. But I don't think there's a bad choice in the mix this year.
Well, we've got those decisions to be made. We'll obviously have news of those announcements as far as the finalists are concerned before next weekend's MISL Championship Series. But we do have games to get to, and we've got obviously two potentially classic series. We had a rematch. We have a rematch in one of the series with the Milwaukee Wave and the Missouri Comets. We mentioned earlier what a classic series that was last season. Now the Comets maybe feel as though they might have the upper hand, and if they can get a win at home to start this thing off, then there's a lot of pressure on the Wave. How do you see this thing playing out?
Well, I'll tell you, that series last year was one of the greatest sports series. I mean, when you take the fact that, it was sort of like, the underdog going in after losing the first game at home and winning, back-to-back nail-biters on the road, it was tremendous. I see it going the same way. I see it, it's going to be very, very close games. The team that catches a break. I'm going to be politically correct here because people actually do listen to this, Nicholas, and so I'm not going to put my foot in my mouth and offend anybody or give any coach any sort of locker room fodder.
He's talking about you, Mr. Tozer.
So you know what? It's going to be a heck of a series. If you're in one of those two markets, or even if you're not in those two markets, I strongly recommend going out to the games and watching the games. It's going to be very competitive, some great soccer. But I'm not going to choose a winner because I honestly don't know.
I think it's really hard to pick a winner. I'll say this. We had the highest viewership for the season on Sunday afternoon watching the Comets Wave game. We had consistently an average of more than 400 people watching online, let alone the people that were at US Cellular Arena taking that game in. So certainly all eyes will be on these two contests on Sunday afternoon at the Independence Event Center, and then Monday night football from US Cellular Arena. Definitely looking forward to that.
I will say this. I think the winner of the first game, whoever that is, unlike last year where Milwaukee won it and then lost, I think the winner of the first game is going to win the series.
As far as the Baltimore Blast against the Syracuse Silver Knights, which kicks us off on Friday night, obviously a terrific matchup. Syracuse goes in there knowing it has the ability to beat the Blast. Who are the key guys that you're looking at for this series? Is it really that? Because to me, it really comes down to that battle that we're likely to see all night between Michelle Millward and Mike Lookingland.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna be the marquee matchup. You got two, big strong men there. Vanzela's proven himself. Brady O'Quinn's going to have to, to use a hockey terminology, stand on his head because he's going to have, blast after blast coming at him. Santana, Forbes, Uber Peripovic, all the big time guys have to play at their highest level. Baltimore, again, it's a lot harder to keep winning when you're the hunted.
Yeah.
When you're the defending champion and you're sitting on top of that mountain, everybody's pointing, to, hey, let's beat the champion. But until somebody beats them, they're still the champ. So
exactly.
once again, should be a great series. Again, it's going to be a little bit awkward waiting, 4 days for the second game. But that, I think, in my opinion, that's going to help Syracuse, because they're not as deep as Baltimore, in my opinion.
Certainly, I mean, you've got to have the big players step up. You look at Nelson Santana. His experience is going to prove crucial here. Michelle Millward's experience is going to prove crucial here. Because the Syracuse, I mentioned earlier, they've been playing playoff-style matches a lot of this season. They've been playing these tight contests where it has been relatively low scoring, particularly in games against the Blast. I think there'll be an advantage to that. They'll take something from that, but it's still something for a guy like Kanado Forbes, a guy like Slavisa Ubiparopovic, a guy like Brian O'Quinn to be playing their first MISL playoff game. That that just adds an extra edge to it. It'll be interesting to see how they respond.
You know, and this is the kind of game where some of those, lack of a better term, not as well-known Baltimore players, not as high profile, like a Max Ferdinand, like a Tony Donatelli, like a Steven Deroux. This is the kind of game where
this is the kind of game where guys like Mike Diesel, Marco Mangione,
exactly
those guys that have been prone to show up and chip in key moments.
Because the second that you focus on,
the second
a Neto or somebody, a marquee player, that's where the depth of the Blast comes in. So. You look for those guys to have big series.
Mangione, he gained experience last year. He's his second season this year. He's chipped in some important goals this year, and he certainly could do again in this series. Certainly would make a big difference if he's able to. Anyway, we've got these 4 matchups coming up in the next week. We've got the Syracuse Silver Knights and Baltimore Blast start on Friday night at the On Center. If you haven't seen the Silver Knights' promo videos for that game, go check them out on their YouTube channel. And if you can't get to the On Center, make sure you join us on YouTube to watch that game Friday at 7:30 p.m. Second game of that series next Tuesday at Baltimore Arena, 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. I know that'll be a packed house. For the defending champions. Then the other series, Missouri Comets against the Milwaukee Waves, starts on Sunday afternoon at 3:10 p.m. Central, 4:10 p.m. Eastern Time at the Independence Event Center. Certainly expecting a packed house there, and that very quickly, Monday night, switches to Milwaukee and U.S. Cellular Arena. That game is kicking off at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. So we hope you'll join us for all of those. If you can't make it to the arena, make sure you join us on YouTube for all the playoff action. Chris, as always, a pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, Nicholas. It's the most fun hour of the week for me.
And thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us again this time next week.
And thank you to our brand new producer.
Our new producer Ian, who has taken over from producer Seth. We thank you. Welcome aboard. Great job again.
Absolutely.
And we hope you'll join us this time next week as we take a look ahead to the 2014 MISL Championship Series. Until then, for Chris, Ian, myself, bye for now.